Hello and welcome to Adobe Live Asia Pacific. My name is Flynn and I'm the host for today and our next session as well. We have tomorrow. We have two sessions today, which is awesome. About to introduce our very first guest. This is a brand new segment that we have over the coming weeks where we're bringing some of the speakers from Adobe MAX to Adobe Live to have a bit of a chat of them, maybe get some behind the scenes stuff. We've kind of given them all a bit of a different brief and everyone's approaching it in a different way, which is super, super awesome. We're going to get started now. We don't have a lot of time because our guest is James Barnard. James, jump on in, mate. What's going on?
Hello, how's it going? Thanks
Good.
for that. Just 45 minutes to go through the session, which I originally thought we had an hour for.
Right.
So I appreciate that. We've got to crack on. We've got lots to talk about.
We do. Key takeaway is James Barnard. You probably all know who he is, so we're just going to jump back. We're just going to jump into it, I guess. We stick around. We do have another stream with Unmesh Dinda as well immediately after, which is why James has such a tight deadline. But, it wouldn't be exciting if there weren't a couple of curveballs thrown your way. Chat is live, so if you have questions as we're going, comments, anything like that, throw them in. But I am going to throw over to James so that he can get started.
Thank you. That's going to be a tough act to follow. Poor old Unmash having to go after me. Thanks a lot for having me. Yeah, so basically today, this is like a preview sort of what the Adobe Max session in Miami is going to be about. And you don't have to be in Miami to watch it, do you? You can watch it online. It's all going to be live streamed. So Flynn originally asked me to sort of have you ever got anything on the cutting room floor that we can add and talk about? And I was like, no, it's an hour. I've got nothing left over. It's really tough to fill an hour-long slot. But one thing I did want to talk about is just like an overview of the talk and a couple of little things that are going to be included in there. My talk is called See One, Do One, Teach One, Techniques for Mastering Adobe Illustrator. So I've had a complete identity crisis right now. I split my time between working on logo designs for my own clients and then teaching everything else I know via my social platforms. And I've become a bit of like a design educator. And you and I have done a few live streams together, Flynn. We had one session where we were in the Sydney office. And so Flynn actually gets a little shout out in my presentation. This is what the deck actually looks like. And Flynn's going to get a shout out in Miami. So
Lovely.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
When we were in Sydney, I was presenting with Chris Hansen and Flynn was in the back of the room as like producer and he was managing the chat. Right. He threw me a curveball question on one of our live streams, which was tell me the difference between like optically aligned versus metrically aligned or mathematically aligned while we were doing a logo design live on screen. And it completely like threw me. I just went off on this massive tangent for about 5 minutes talking about like optical illusions within design, the overshoot, the Poggendorf illusion, the irradiation illusion. I just went off. And then completely threw me off track. We got back on track. Somebody else on the chat said like, how do you know all this? And I realized later on that it was because I've made like umpteen bloody videos about optical illusions within graphic design. Me making content teaching design is actually making me a better designer.
Yeah.
So when I got to that point where I was like, okay, now I'm teaching people to use these platforms, I don't have any credentials at all as an educator.
Right.
So I'm like basically teaching people how to use the software and I have no certifications in graphic design. I didn't go to school for graphic design. My degree was in music, multimedia and electronics. So nothing to do with that.
That's where the rap came from. Okay. The plot thickens.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. A former musician / drummer turned Photoshop rap artist. So yeah, I basically had a bit of an identity crisis and was worried that people will be like saying, who are you to teach me? Like, what credentials have you got? Right. So I took the Adobe Certified Professional exam. This is about a year ago now. It looks like this. It's printed up on my wall. Is the official certificate. When you pass the Adobe Certified exam, you get this little badge that goes on you can put anywhere you want on your portfolio. And I'm an Adobe Certified Professional now. So I do know what I'm talking about. I passed the exam. This is what it looked like at home. So when you take the exam, you have to disconnect all of your external monitors. You're only allowed to use one laptop. Your phone is out of reach. You have to do like a recording of yourself and your surroundings. It's like a full exam under test conditions. Anything that's kind of reachable that you can use to cheat, they check. So you do like a selfie video around the room, and then you take the exam for like an hour or so. And at Adobe Max this year, you can actually take these exams.
Mm.
So you're going to be able to actually rock up, go to one of the labs on one of the 3 days, sit an exam, and do it under test conditions there, and then become Adobe certified. So this is what the certificate looks like. You get a score out of 700. You're tested on 5 different sections: working in the designer's industry, project setup, organizing documents, creating and modifying visual elements, and publishing digital media. And if you're interested, 950 out of 1,000. It's not bad, right?
Ooh, pretty good. Not perfect.
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, you don't get feedback on the question that you got wrong. And I can remember a few distinct questions. We'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, you don't get feedback and you don't get a list of the questions that you got wrong. So I'll never know which was the question I got
Oh
wrong. And it really
no.
annoys me to this day.
We're gonna have to give some feedback. I'll have to try and track someone down
Yeah,
who's doing
if you
this.
know anybody at Certipoint, these are the people that, sorry, Certiport, these are the people that do
Right.
the tests. Yeah, let me know. I'd love to know the question I got wrong. Some of them were quite tricky, okay, because there's a lot that you need to kind of cover, okay? So what I'm going to try and do today is to give you like a full run through of everything you need to know in Adobe Illustrator to pass this exam. So sections 1 and 5 are a little bit sort of overarching and not so much software specific, apart from the very last bit of section 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through. If you have questions as we go through, please ask them, because there is this thing called what's it called when you, I forget what it's called, when you've known something for so long you forget what it's like to not know. So
Right.
if I'm going
Yeah.
over anything that's a little bit too that feels simple for me but actually isn't, just let me know and I'll slow down a little bit, although we
Cool.
haven't actually got much time, so can't slow down that much. So yeah, here we go. This is the Adobe Max website. If you go up to sessions at the top here, click on certification. These are all of the different exams that you can take. There's 9 or 10 there. This is the one we're going to cover today: graphic design and illustration using Adobe Illustrator. And on the website, there is all of these sections are sort of already listed off for you. And then you can dive into each section to find out a bit more about it. So if you want to practice before, if you know all of these terms, you'll be fine within the exam. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through them one by one, and we're going to try and sort of tick off the list as we go through and see what we know in Illustrator. And anything that's a little bit trickier, I'm going to dive into Illustrator and show you how to do it.
Cool.
Okay.
All right. Sounds great.
All right, what I've done is
Alessandra in chat saying I signed up for one of the certified exams and I'm nervous to take. Yeah, the exam makes me nervous. Okay, well this is a stream for you. Oh my goodness, how
it
perfect!
is absolutely, yeah. It's a bit intimidating, isn't it? Especially as well, like if you fail it,
What
it's
does that
it
mean?
could be quite embarrassing, right? I was freaking out taking this test. I was really
Yeah.
nervous. Like taking this test to give myself a credential in graphic design, and if I fail this exam, maybe I should shut down my Instagram account. I don't know.
Yeah. Exactly.
I was
What do you
very
do
pleased to
then?
pass this one. All right, what I've done is I've broken out all of the 5 sections into artboards in Illustrator, and underneath each section, I've got some examples to go through. So we'll start at question 1. What I think might be good is if I put this on the left. I have this wicked Chrome extension called Spectacle. If you press Command Option Left, it puts my web browser on the right, and I can do the same with Illustrator, Command Option Right. So hopefully this will work, and we're going to have this kind of side by side.
Cool.
I think that's working. All right, the first section is pretty overarching. It's kind of common sense. I can't teach too much of it. There's a lot to go through in this. So identify the purpose, audience, and audience needs for preparing designs and artwork. So determine whether content is relevant to the purpose. Basically, it's like client goals, target audience, demographics, accessibility. And they can't really test you on most of this, but one thing you should know is that accessibility is a big part of graphic design. And if you go to the Adobe color.adobe.com, click on create and go to accessibility tools up here, you've got a contrast checker and a colorblind safe check. Okay, so this is something that you might get tested on, or you might need to know about, is that you need to have enough contrast between your colors in order to meet the standards, the WCAG standards for things like websites and graphic design. Now you can check your contrast colors on here. So if we make this blue a bit lighter, you'll see underneath it's failing for all of those colors. And this is a great website just to use to double check your design work and things like logo projects. If you've got a dark color on a light background, put them both in here and make sure that your contrast ratio is passing the test. So when I make this darker, all the way you'll see the pass lines come in, and then regular text is the hardest test to pass. Small text, pass for 17 point and below. So that's pretty handy to know. Color blindness. Now, if you actually go into Adobe Illustrator and you go to View and then Proof Setup, we actually have two types of color blindness that we can test for in Adobe Illustrator under our View menu. So yeah, just have that in the back of your mind when you're working with any sort of layouts. If you just double click on this, it'll make sure that your colors are contrasting enough to be viewed for those two types of color blindness. So let's check the other one. Pretty good. Okay. I don't want to check my presentation. I've used a pink color on a dark blue background. I hope it actually goes past the test. That would be quite embarrassing.
I was just thinking about a recent brand that I did. We ended up using like a really deep navy kind of color and not a, I didn't test it. I was a bit scared.
You can actually, it's quite important. You can actually be fined if you don't meet the tests, if you don't pass the criteria, depending on where you live, there are fines.
Really?
So if you're in something like web design, that's hugely important. You've got to absolutely double check your contrast. Otherwise you can get fined something like 10 grand or $20,000, I think it is in some places. So yeah, just be careful of that. Keep an eye out on it.
Good tip.
Okay. The next sections, I can't really teach, but it's all common sense based stuff. It's like processes within graphic design, wireframes, prototypes, feedback, project scope creep, and file management. Okay, it's basically just use common sense when they ask you questions about specific things about actually working in the industry. I doubt many people will struggle with this section. It's all pretty straightforward stuff. The one thing I do remember being tested on and there being a question about was there was a picture of a model being used for a layout, and it asked the question, what release would need to be acquired to use this image or to use this layout? And it was a model release. So you're basically asking the model's permission to use their picture within that layout. And so it's kind of like standard stuff within graphic design. If you're filming at a location, you need a location release. If you're using a person, you need that person's permission to be used in that layout. So that's all that's basically asking there. So pretty straightforward stuff. Okay, I've got my notes here, by the way, because there's a lot to go through. So I'm going to basically just keep on cracking on. And then Flynn, if you can let me know how we're doing for time, that would be fantastic.
Well, we're 13 minutes in, my friend, so...
We're flying. We've just got 5 sections to go. Okay. All right. Demonstrate knowledge of digital graphics terminology. Okay. So the main thing you need to know here is the difference between a rasterized image and a vector-based image. And so if you don't know, all rasterizing means is that you're converting it to pixels, to be represented as pixels. So vector artwork uses maths to represent lines and shapes, which means that instead of when you blow it up, you can scale it infinitely bigger because it's using vectors and mathematics to represent those line drawings on the screen. Pixels, you need to know that depending on the resolution of your image, you can only blow it up so much. And for digital applications, that's 72 ppi. And for print applications, that's 300 ppi. Okay, so again, to some people, this will be pretty straightforward stuff. Bit depth. Do you know what bit depth is, Flynn? You've probably heard it before, but do you actually know what it means?
I wouldn't know what it meant. I just think the amount of information, like the amount of pixels in like the density of pixels
exactly the number of bits to represent a pixel. So like 8-bit is 256 colors. It's about color representation as well. Right. So 8-bit is 256 colors. The more bits you use, the more colors you could use.
More color range, so that's like 2.
Yeah, exactly. And that's also gamut as well. Okay, is the ranges of colors. So this is the kind of the typical diagram that you might see. A is the visual gamut. So these are the different colors that you can see with your eyes. B, that triangle in the middle there is what can be represented using the RGB lamps within your monitor, and they fire at different intensities. If your RGB lamps all fire at once, you get white. If they don't, you get black. CMYK is in the middle, and this is again the difference between sort of additive and subtractive color. Additive color is RGB, so the things you see with screens. So color that is emitted via something. So light is making that color. With print, you're blocking the reflected light from the paper. So the color mixes in different ways. And that's our color modes within Illustrator. So when you set up a new document, you have different variations of color modes here, RGB versus CMYK. So when you're working in RGB, you're working for screens. When you're in CMYK, you're working for print. But the same thing with our resolution here. If we tick the new document settings at the top and we click web, it defaults to 72 ppi over here. If we click print, it changes to 300 ppi. Okay, we all know that, right? Pretty standard stuff. 1.5, demonstrate knowledge of basic design principles. Okay, so the thing you need to basically know here is Gestalt principles, which means, let's see if I can sum this up. It means how a design looks as a whole. So basically, if you want to know more about this, I've got a video in Gestalt principles. It will just Google James Barnard Gestalt and you'll find it. There's like 7 main ones. You just by being alive on this earth, you will know all of these Gestalt principles. It's about sort of determining them within a design and being able to call upon them from time to time.
Right. It's
I
like
can never remember them all.
Negative space, but or how you read things because we read left to right. Like a Western?
Yeah, and it's sort of like say if you look at someone's face, you don't recognize who they are because of the shape of their nose. You recognize who they are because of the whole picture.
Like
You're not looking at individual elements. And this is what Gestalt basically is determining is it's like these little things that factor a design as a whole are defined by these 7 or 8, depending on who you talk to, principles. So again, far too much to cover in one session, but yeah, it's good to know. And when you see them, you'll know them. It's ridiculous. Okay, one thing we need to look at here is under B, we've got font size, style, color, alignment, kerning, tracking, leading. Okay, most of these you should know. Just want to double check that everyone is clear on the difference between kerning, tracking, and leading. So kerning is the individual space between 2 letters. So if I bring up my type panel here, and this is our kerning setting here, so we can change these values to track those, to kern those 2 letters. Hang on, you select the 2 of them. So kerning means the space between 2 letters. Tracking is the spacing between all of our letters within a word or a typeface. So
like
kerning is between
command up and down as well, I think, isn't it?
Sorry?
Holding down command and going up and down, and it changes the tracking.
You got the shortcuts already. Brilliant. Very good. Yeah, use the scroll wheel on your mouse as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
Leading is the line spacing between your the line breaks, which is this one here. Okay. So that's the difference between kerning, tracking, and leading. It's good just to define that one before we move any further. Aspect ratio, rule of thirds, foreground, background, color to color tone. Again, pretty straightforward. Rule of thirds. It's just a regularly used approach in graphic design. When you take a photo and you see it's broken up into 3, that's why those grids are there. And I don't remember being tested on anything like this. Again, when they ask you questions, they're multiple choice as well, so it's kind of easy to pick the right one when you've got a bit of common sense.
Yeah, cool.
All right, let's go to section 2. Oops. And we're going to close our character panel here. All right, project setup and interface. Now, quite a lot to go through in here. We've got the first section we've kind of already covered. The color modes, bleed, raster effects, resolution. This is about sort of when you set up a new document, you've got all of these standard bits and pieces. So specifically for print, you've got your bleed here. So do we need to? We're not going to have time to talk about bleed. But when you print something that needs color to go to the edge of the page, printers don't often print to the edge of a page. You have to print with a little bit of extra space called a bleed, and then that was then trimmed off, and it looks like your document has actually been printed right to the edge when it actually hasn't. And you do that by changing your bleed settings in here. Okay. We've talked about this before. Let's go to our workspaces and the sort of the actual layout within Illustrator. So if we go up, if we just double click this and open it up, we go to Window, Workspace. We've got all of these different options here. Essentials, Classic is the one that we're probably all used to. Essentials is a little bit new now. We've got if I move something within my workspace and I move something around and it breaks, I need to be able to know to go to workspace and reset the workspace that I'm currently on, and you can set keyboard shortcuts for that. I do remember being tested on this. It was to do with like we're editing a logo or something like that, and it made me change workspaces to something that was less about sort of typography. It was more about the essentials panels that you need. So I ended up having to change the workspace. And so when you take the test, you actually log into a virtual machine and you will play within Illustrator and actually work on Illustrator
ask you,
via a web
how they do that.
link. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So it's you do actually work in the software. You're not just selecting multiple choice questions. You are actually clicking drop down menus and working with the software. So you do need to be able to showcase that you can work your way around these workspaces. And then settings as well, settings and general. So little things that they might ask you to change, like scaling strokes and effects, for instance, when you scale things up and down and you want the stroke width to stay the same, even though the thing is getting smaller, you check this on and off, which is now found in the properties panel over here. Little things like that. Units and guides. So like changing the measurements for your document. And for instance, if you want to change the measurements on your rulers, you right click on them and change them to inches and feet rather than when you're working in print. And if you want to change them to pixels, you right click over here and it'll ask you, it's like I remember actually is to make grids. So how to draw rulers by dragging them from the side, turning these on and off with Command semicolon to view and display them, and then turning the grid on and off with Command and apostrophe as well. Okay.
Nice. So they ask you the shortcuts as well as the
yes,
menu,
they do.
You get to choose
So obviously edit keyboard shortcuts. This is how you change any keyboard shortcut within Adobe Illustrator. And if you can find it within the menu, let's say if you want to change the keyboard shortcut for something like crop, which is under the object panel, you would then go to edit, keyboard shortcuts, change your drop down here to menu commands, and then find it under the object, and then find your crop command, which is down here.
Quick question for you, were there any things that you stumbled on because you've set up custom shortcuts, right?
Well, luckily for me, I've worked in a lot of agencies, so I'm used to going into a fresh computer or a default setting of Adobe Illustrator and setting up my own custom workspace and then saving it. That's another thing as well. It's like once you've set up a workspace, you can create a new one, give it a name, and save it, and then call upon it later on. And I have tons of these, depending on how many monitors I've got, whose computer I'm on. So yeah, luckily for me, I'm very used to getting around those defaults.
Right. Nice.
Okay, so we've got Command 1 to view at 100%, Command 0 to fit your artboard onto the screen. If we go to settings, and then if I remember right, it's performance, animated zoom and scrubby zoom. Animated zoom, you hold down Command and space and scrub left or right with your mouse. I don't like that, so I turned that off immediately, and that was something I had to get around pretty quickly. I like the box one. So if you uncheck animated zoom, you get the box one, which is when you do Command and spacebar and draw a box, and it goes straight into that box when you zoom. That's my favorite. And by the way, I'm zooming there with my mouse. That's cheating. Don't do that on your
test.
I've got a special mouse with a scroll wheel on the side, so that's totally cheating. Okay. In the section here, we've got sorry, we just went through grids and guides and user interface. Going down, we are navigating our document with panning and zooming, and we talked about rulers and changing the measurements of the units on our rulers and our grids. Snap or align to objects and using view and then snap. Where is it? Oh, I can't find it now. View, snap to grid, snap to pixel, snap to point, snap to glyph, depending on what setting you want. And then back in here, we've got our different view modes. Okay, so these are quite important. So we got up here, view. We've got outline mode, which is Command Y. So when we're looking at something that is live text or a vector, we'll see outlines of this. Live text will appear black. If I outline my text, it changes to vector and appears like an actual vector. So Command Y to get back into that. Some of these view modes, by the way, are absolutely incredible. Presentation mode, fantastic. Press escape to get out of that. There's a really good one. Screen mode, full screen bar. So if you want as much screen real estate as humanly possible, you can just flick these modes on and off to get lots more access to your document. And so that the toolbars aren't getting in the way. Press escape to come out of that. I'm going to change this back to normal. Okay, good. And then, okay, now drawing modes. This is something I did a video about literally yesterday because I didn't know about this before I went to research this presentation. So down the bottom here, if I click on a shape, I'm just going to expand my
Does that not
toolbar.
illustrate perfectly your talk at Max as well?
Yeah, it does exactly. Yeah. Let's go view. Sorry, window workspace. Okay, Essentials Classic. Okay, big toolbar on the left. We need this. You see these three little buttons here. This one is automatically selected. Draw behind anything that I draw on the canvas. Let's say if I bring up my brush tool and I change the color. Oh, we're still in. We've got our color blindness one. Swatch still selected here. Let's just change this to white. So to pink.
We got 13 minutes left, by the way. 13 minutes.
Sorry?
13 minutes.
We're never going to get to all this. This is ridiculous. Okay, draw inside. This is the one I was showcasing yesterday. If I want to draw with a brush and that's selected, it draws inside the shape that I have selected. I didn't know that until I did this one. Okay. 2.4, embedding and linking. This is the difference between embedding and linking within a document. If I drag an image into my Illustrator document, it imports by default as a link, which means that file is locally on my machine and not inside the actual Illustrator document, which keeps the file size down unless I press embed up here, which then puts that image inside my document. And now when I save the Illustrator file, it's much bigger because that JPEG information is actually inside. All right, we're going to go fast now. Eyedropper tool. For eyedropper tool, if I double click on the eyedropper tool, I can change the things that the eyedropper picks up. So if I don't want to pick up a stroke, I can turn that off, press OK. And when I click on here, it doesn't pick up the stroke. It just picks up the fill color. Very handy. If I want to change the color of something, let's say I sample a color here. If I hold down Alt or Option and click something else, it will change the color of that thing to the thing that I just selected. Do that. Yeah. If I click and drag, I can select anything, including things outside of my Illustrator document, things on Google Chrome or my desktop, that kind of thing. So that's really handy.
I didn't know you could do that.
Yep, amazing. All right, gradient panel. We have two types of freeform gradients. If I press G for my gradients, we have a freeform gradient, which looks like this. So you can change individual colors and move these around and then sample these from other places. We have also our mesh tool, gradient mesh. If I press U for the mesh tool, click on a shape, and then press A for the direct selection tool and sample that. I can do crazy things with my gradients. Press A for selection and then sample this. Amazing. There's the difference between freeform and the mesh tool, which is something covered under this panel here. I'm not going to have time to do that. Let's go on to section 3, which is organizing documents. Okay, so this is the big one. All right, so let's have a look at. I'll bring this over here. Let's talk about our layers panel. If I just bring up window layers over here, we have a sketch. So if I want to work from a sketch within Adobe Illustrator, if I double click on my layer and I check template and press OK, it automatically locks everything within that layer and then dims it to 50%. So I can now create a new layer over the top and then sketch over or draw over things and not muck that about. There's also layer targeting as well. This little circular button here on the right hand side. If I click on that, I can now apply blend modes directly to everything within that layer with the appearance panel. So with the transparency panel. So if I want to put that some like effects or blend modes or crazy things onto everything in under one layer, I click this button here and it targets that layer, and now I can do things like add multiply or do things like add drop shadows and crazy stuff to that entire layer as one.
That's such a crazy thing. Anyone watching this, like, play around with that, because it effectively works very similarly to how it does in Photoshop, where you're sorting an adjustment on all layers down and everything like that.
That's right.
It's really
you
great.
Right-click on a layer in Photoshop and apply an effect to it. That's basically the same thing. If I want to move things between layers, I can select the object, click this little square here, and then slide that up to the layer above. And now that's on the layer above, which is really handy. Undo that. Okay. And then paste remembers layers. That's quite an interesting one. So if you automatically paste something from one layer to another, it will remember the layer that you were on, because it usually defaults to the active layer. So if I put this up to layer 2, now if I cut that, and then over here I've got paste remembers layers, and then select option 1 and I paste it, it'll automatically change the layer and paste it back onto layer 2. So that's quite a handy thing to know.
Okay, cool.
Remember to turn that off again when you're done. Okay, clipping mask. This is something I remember being tested on. The shortcut for that is Command 7. So if I want to clip this picture, I press Command 7, double click into that, enters the isolation mode, and then I can change the mask and move it around. Pretty straightforward stuff if you know it. If you don't know it, mind blowing.
Yeah.
So okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to section 4 because this is the big one. How are we doing for time?
We have 7 minutes.
All right. I'm going to stop referring back to this now. Basically, these are the tools that that weren't as clear. So I'm going to cover off all the tools that you kind of need to know. You probably know most of them, but some of these are a little bit trickier than others. Pencil tool. If you didn't know, N for the pencil tool, you can manipulate current vectors with the pencil tool if you have the settings set up. Typically it's not working for me now. That's probably because I've defaulted this. Let's do smooth and then turn this up a little bit. Double clicked on the pencil tool for that. There we go. We're manipulating our paths now with the pencil tool. And then I can do option click to remove sections as well. Yes, I can. No, I've got the wrong shortcut setting. Never mind, moving on. B for the brush tool, Shift B for the blob brush tool. What is the blob brush tool? It basically, instead of adding a stroked path, so the brush adds a stroked path. The blob brush tool, Shift and B, creates vectors that are added on to our shape.
Making a shape.
Which is a different behavior to what you're used to. Curvature tool. Okay, so this is so embarrassing. I went the longest time without knowing that this was here. Okay, so there it is. It's between the pen tool and the lasso tool. It looks a little bit similar to both. This is why I didn't see it. It's absolutely ridiculous. If I click a path, press the curvature tool, and double click on a node, it automatically converts it to a curve. Absolutely ridiculous. I went the longest time without knowing this. You double click on it again, it turns it back into a point. You can add your points in and then move them around, and the curves stay consistent. See how it's changing the other one here? Ridiculous. Type tools, these are pretty straightforward, but if you hold down on the type tool on the left here, you can change this. So area type tool goes inside our shape. Type on a path is to put the type around the path. Vertical type is to go down. So if I click text, it's going to do it on top of each other. Same with the area. Vertical type on a path. What the big one though is touch type. So if you push T and then Shift and T, you can individually click elements within a font, change them, things like rotation, kerning, size, and the font stays live.
So it's
Which
still,
is absolutely
so
ridiculous.
it's not
So I can,
outlined now. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, there we go. Like it's insane.
Wow.
So this is still a live font without being outlined. I can change rotation, kerning, and get really, really granular with these details
Cool.
without the font actually being converted into an outline. Absolutely ridiculous. Okay.
I've just been told we've got a little bit more time than we actually thought. So just probably
Slow down and relax a little bit.
probably 9 minutes rather than 4 minutes left. And also everyone's really enjoying this as well. Everyone wants you to do a part 2 of anything that doesn't come through.
Yeah.
It's like all
Are they
these
enjoying
TikTok
the panic
tutorials in
my
one.
voice? Or are they enjoying the actual content of this?
A little bit more time. A little bit more time.
Okay, thanks. Okay, text wrapping. Object text wrap make, which actually is something you probably recognize if you're a good InDesign user. This will basically make sure that no text touches my object, and I can change the radius on this by going to object text wrap options, and I can change things like the offset of that to make it bigger.
Right.
Text threading and overflow. If you create a box of text and there's too much text in it, you get this little plus symbol here, and then we'll zoom out and put that somewhere else. And that's a text thread there. So this box is connected to this one. If I delete out from this box here, it's kind of like how columns work in InDesign.
Yeah.
It's going to
InDesign in your Illustrator.
Yeah, straightforward stuff.
Very good.
Where have we got to here? I wonder why have I got a circle there? I can't remember why I have a circle there. All right, let's go to selections. Okay, so loads of ways. This was, I remember being tested on this actually. There's loads of like how to select similar things within Illustrator. So if I want to select everything with the same color of this, I go up to select same fill color. And everything with that color has now been selected. There must be something down here with blue. Yeah, that same blue.
Right.
Now, if I have a selection that I need to manipulate all the time, I can save selections. So let's say I want to keep these objects selected. Instead of grouping them together, I can do save selection and call them blue things. And now when I click on this, any points, or if I'm working within a document, I don't even need to click on them. I can just go to select blue things, and it'll select those 3 objects, which is
really cool.
handy.
Didn't know that.
There's also select this new one called Start Global Edit, which is really handy. So if I have things that are like these star shapes here, I go to select Start Global Edit. It picks up all the stars, and whatever I do to one, it changes to all of them. If I resize them, if I change the number of points on the star, insane. Oh, that's a new feature. That's a new way.
Yeah, I was going to say I didn't know that one.
Really good. Okay, what else have we got? The group selection tool. I remember being tested on this. I'd never heard of that before, and I had to figure out how to use it. It's basically if you have a group and I ungroup something, and now I'm selecting these things, and these are all within a group. If I just want to select something within the group, though, I can go up to it and hold on my direct selection tool, click the group selection tool, and that now allows me to select things within that group without the entire group being selected. So sometimes you just want to edit that one thing, and it's really annoying. You have to go into isolation mode to get to it.
Yeah.
Oh, how many times am I having to click in? Oh my goodness, it's in another group. It's nested in here, and you're double clicking like crazy.
Especially if you're trying to select the color.
Is your friend.
Because the colors actually change, especially when you're trying to select a color, because the color actually changes when it goes into isolation mode. The amount of times I've done that, and I've just, yeah. Cool.
Okay, let's have a look over here. Okay, so transform tools, the scale tool, which is S. We all know that one, right? Scaling up and down. Same thing with the free transform tools. If I hold down on the scale tool and press shear, we've got this one, which is changing the shear of the shape, so the tilt at what it's on. The reshape tool, which you might not know about, is the one underneath that. So if I select the subject, select the reshape tool, and I click and drag on this curve, I can bend it wherever I want, and it adds path points in. You might have seen this before if you've ever used a pen tool and you hold down Alt or Option on the pen tool, you can bend directly on the path itself rather than manipulating the handles here. You can actually just hold down Option and click on the line itself, and it manipulates that bend. That's pretty handy.
It's a good tip to get those smooth lines, I think.
Yeah, really good for type designers. Object path simplify. There's a difference between simplify and smooth, which is newer. So we've got simplify and smooth. Okay, so simplify is trying to remove the number of individual anchor points within this squiggly line here. So it's trying to basically be clever and figure out how to create that line and as few path points as possible, which is different to smooth, which behaves like this. Path smooth. And now if I drag this up, it'll almost straighten that line the smoother I get. So it's very handy this if you have like wobbly lines within a design, or if you're working with a type and you've got a few kinks in it that you're not happy with, the smooth tool will iron out those kinks for you and create a really organic shape. But you need to know the difference between those two because they're not the same. Okay, we haven't got time to go through that. Let's do the eraser tool, which is Shift and E. We all know that one, right? Click on that one again. Knife tool cuts that shape.
We've got about 3 minutes, by the way. Just a heads up.
Okay.
Gave you plenty of time.
I think we can do it. We'll just cover this. We won't cover publishing digital media. It's basically just how to export all of the files from your document. Right. But we'll try and get through the rest of these tools. Okay. Wait. So Pathfinder, does everybody know the Pathfinder tools on the right here? We've got Unite, we've got minus front, we've got intersect, which is the bit in between, and we've got exclude. If you hold down Alt on any one of these, it creates a compound path. So instead of doing a destructive edit, it creates a editable edit. Let's do a better example of that with the minus front. Hold down Alt or Option, click on your path. Now, instead of that being destructive, it's left that shape there for me to then remove it later on.
Very cool.
Pretty handy. The shape builder tool, Shift and M, works in a similar way. It's like the Pathfinder tool on steroids. If I hold down and click, it will join things together, undo that. And if I hold down Alt or Option, it will remove the sections that I don't want. So I can just draw away the bits that I don't need. Really handy. Live Paint is K. So if I select this, and then press my, actually, let's just select orange as a fill color, press K. I can click on, hold on, K, click on elements to color them in, and I'll hold down Alt or Option. It'll go to the eyedropper tool, which will sample a color, and then I can paint in that color into that new section. Cool. Pretty handy. Ignore live trace. We haven't got time. Raster versus vector. We were talking about this before. It's the effects that they're going to ask you questions on. So which of the effects in the effects menu are raster based and which are vector based? So things like drop shadows on the stuff that you get in Photoshop that use pixels, those are raster effects. Okay, so you see the drop shadow there is very pixelated. That's because it is a effect that uses pixels to create the outcome. Other effects that use vector, so these are mainly under the Illustrator effects here, things like path effect, offset path, distort and transform, they're all vector-based stuff. Graphic styles, bring up our window, graphic styles menu.
We'll have to leave it at this one. We're going to get cut off.
Okay. Well, I knew there was going to be too much to go through there. But yeah, basically, if you have common sense within Adobe Illustrator, you'll be able to pass this exam. Don't be nervous because of how much we had to go through there. But I have 45 minutes to cover the entire Adobe Illustrator package.
I think you did a fantastic job. You left everybody wanting more, even myself. But we do have to cut it there. I don't want us to get cut off completely. Thank you everyone for joining us in chat. Stick around, and we'll be back with Unmeshed Into soon. Thank you, James.
Thanks a lot,
I think
guys.
we just got
See
cut
ya.
off on Behance, actually. See you later. Bye.